Hey everybody, I'm nutritionist Dr. Mike Roussel, and welcome to this episode of the Dr. Mike Show, where we're going to talk about fine-tuning some key ratios with your nutrition and fitness to help improve your health. All right, so let's talk about ratios. Today I want to talk about 6 specific ratios that you're going to need to adjust or tweak to make your nutrition or your fitness work better for you. One of the things that if you want to change your body, you want to change your health, you have to change your habits. And that's going to mean that we need to make some adjustments to the way that we eat, the way that we exercise, in order to give ourselves better results. If we keep doing the same stuff again and again, we're not going to get the change. Now, again, we also don't need to just wholesale throw out everything we've been doing and just kind of swear it off and then try to start from scratch. I think that's where we make a lot of mistakes. So today I want to talk about some things that maybe people are generally thinking they need to throw out. For example, pasta and sauce, right? You may think, oh, I'm going to want to lose weight. I can't have carbs. This is something that I can't have anymore. Or maybe they're thinking, well, I got to start losing weight, so I need to start eating eggs at breakfast. But then you just can't eat 6 eggs at breakfast because you're trying to get that 30 grams of protein target. So what are you going to do? That's what we're going to talk about today, is how we can just adjust those ratios to make some of these changes work in your life. We have 6 related to nutrition, and then we have 1 at the end related to your fitness. So let's get started first, and we're going to talk about eggs. Now, eggs are a great food for breakfast, right? They're packed 6 grams of protein. They contain a lot of key amino acids. They also contain some great nutrients like beta carotene. However, one of the problems that we run into with eggs is the ratio is it's basically a 1-to-1 protein to fat. Now, that's fine. Getting fat in your diet is great and it's important. But if you're trying to get upwards of 30 grams of protein at breakfast, you don't want to get also upwards of 30 grams of protein or more, or 30 grams, of fat or more, because what that's going to do is it's going to end up skewing your total calorie intake, and especially your total calorie intake from fats later in the day. Because with fats, we basically have double the amount of energy per gram as we do with protein. So one of the things that you can do is just adjust your ratios. Now, most people, when they start out, maybe they'll just start doing whole eggs. So you'll do 2, 3, and maybe upwards of 6 whole eggs per day. Now, one of my jokes whenever I talk about protein stacking is not everybody wants to eat 6 whole eggs every morning, right? That's a big endeavor. Now, I love eggs, and I actually probably sit down and do 6 whole eggs, but it might not work in your macronutrient breakdown, and you might just not have the appetite for it. So what I suggest you do is you adjust the ratio of eggs to egg whites. Now, egg whites are almost as amazing as eggs because literally all you get is just high quality protein. So 1 egg white contains about 3.5 grams of protein. So if we look at how we can adjust that ratio, and also no fat. So if we start taking a whole egg and then we start layering in egg whites, what we can do is we get the benefit of the fat and the nutrients that you get in the yolk of the whole egg. But then when we start adding the whites, we can further stack on protein, which is harder for us to get at breakfast. So what I recommend is you do a ratio of around 1 whole egg to every 3 egg whites. And what that's going to do is that's going to get you, if you do that, 1 whole egg and 3 egg whites, that's going to put you north of 15 grams of protein for breakfast, right? Just in that little thing. Maybe if you have a glass of milk or you have some yogurt, you mix in like a small little bit. When we talk about protein stacking at breakfast, you mix in a little bit of ground beef that maybe you had leftover from dinner the night before, not even like 2 tablespoons. And all of a sudden, boom, you're like at 30 grams. And also 3 whole eggs, or 1 whole egg and 3 egg whites, is also very manageable for people to eat. So when you're thinking about eggs and consuming eggs, you don't have to go this all whole egg route. Whole eggs do have some great nutrition in them, but we also want to optimize for what our body needs. So I recommend this ratio: 1 whole egg, 3 egg whites, and then scale accordingly. So maybe you're going to do 2 whole eggs and 6 egg whites, whatever your body needs, but tweak that ratio to give you exactly what you want. Next, I want to talk about vinaigrettes. So salad dressings, eating a salad is really a key component of any sort of diet because it's going to give us a lot of vegetables. If we look at the Mind diet, which was a kind of a marriage, I've talked about it before, of a Mediterranean style diet and a DASH style diet, one of the tenets in that study was to eat a salad every single day. So that's a great kind of benchmark for your nutrition. What's a foundational strategy? We've talked about that in some other lessons, like what are these core things that I'm going to hold on to in my nutrition day in and day out. Saying I'm having one salad every day is a great stake to put in the ground and just make sure that you make it happen. So salad could be your whole meal, or you could have it before, a kind of a pre-eating strategy to get yourself a lot of volume, not a lot of calories, so that you feel more satiated as the meal goes on to help control overall calorie intake, right? That's a classic nutrition hack that was uncovered through research by Dr. Barbara Rolls, looking at pre-eating these lower energy density foods before you get into your actual meal. But one of the things where we can run into problems is when we take a salad, which is a high volume, low calorie food, and then we start adding salad dressing to it, right? Salad dressing is primarily oil. Whether it's olive oil or some sort of other oil in your dressing, you're going to be getting a lot of oil. Oil contains a lot of calories, contains a lot of fat, right? Some of that fat is really good for you. But we also don't want to take this low calorie food that we're eating to make us full and then load a bunch of calories onto it. And then all of a sudden we don't have this great low calorie food that we were hoping to use to make ourselves a little bit fuller later in the meal, or to allow us to control less or eat less calories at that meal. And we talked about this in a previous, when we were talking about eating out in a previous show. We talked about this idea of when you have a salad, only adding one fat component, whether it's going to be nuts or cheese or salad dressing, only doing one of those things. Because if we start stacking a bunch of those things, then all of a sudden the calorie content of the salad becomes so big and we don't reap the benefits of eating that salad as much as we hoped. Now, a traditional ratio in a vinaigrette is 3-to-1 oil to vinegar. So what I like to do is I actually flip it and do 1 part oil, 2 parts vinegar. Now, this is definitely heavy on the vinegar side, but I enjoy vinegar a lot, so I don't mind. So what you can do is just ease your way down. You could go 1-to-1. You could go 2-to-1 oil to vinegar, right? So you're slowly moving your ratio down. But just finding ways to replace the volume of oil in your salad dressing with vinegar or with some other liquid. And what that's going to allow you to do is it's going to allow you to use more salad dressing. Like, there are 2 things that are extremely depressing in nutrition. One, when you truly understand what a serving of peanut butter looks like and how small it is, you're like, wow, that's actually what 2 tablespoons genuinely looks like. It's not 2 massive spoonfuls. Like, that's not a serving of peanut butter. And the other is when you look at a serving of a salad dressing. If you have a big, for all my Seinfeld fans out there, like a big salad, a big Seinfeld size big salad, and then you go put a tablespoon and a half of salad dressing, all of a sudden you're like, well, what else am I going to use to make this salad dressing, moist and add this more flavor? And so when we adjust the ratios of our vinaigrettes, that allows us to be a little bit more aggressive with the salad dressings, while also still maintaining that low calorie, meal or pre-meal. The other thing that you can do if you're not totally keen on making your own salad dressings, Bolthouse Farms is a company. We use their salad dressings a ton. They do a lot of cream-based salad dressings that are very low calorie, and so it allows you to add a lot more dressing and really dress up the salad a lot more. Another strategy that you can also use is if you have something like a cream-based, so this is outside the ratio discussion, with oil and vinegar, but if you have a cream-based dressing, what you can do is you can mix in some non-fat Greek yogurt and a little bit of water to thin it out, because if you just do the non-fat Greek yogurt, it might get a little too thick. But adding in a little bit of non-fat Greek yogurt and a little bit of water and mix it up, what that's going to do is it's going to increase the volume, but it's also going to be adding more protein and just more non-caloric liquid through the water, so you can use more salad dressing and still not be bumping up the calories too much. So adjusting the ratios of essentially our calorie-containing versus non-calorie containing components of salad dressing is another key ratio that we want to adjust. Next up, I want to talk about sandwiches. So sandwiches are another thing that have been classically removed from people who are looking to lose weight, improve their overall health. Sandwiches bad, can't eat sandwiches. Part of it has to do with because people generally choose breads. If you've gone through the minimally processed food challenge, we talk actually in a whole lesson about breads, selecting the right bread. A lot of breads are lower quality foods. Lunch meats and sandwich meats generally can also be lower quality. But what ends up happening is there's also like a complete void of vegetables. And so the volume, the amount of food that you get to eat is limited. And then the ratio of the different components, meat, cheese, and bread, plus whatever you're, slathering on the bread itself, all these things skew that ratio of volume to calories. So you end up getting a high calorie meal that's low volume and doesn't deliver a lot of the additional nutrients like fiber that you're really looking for in your day-to-day meals. So what I like to do is adjust the ratio in the sandwich where it's 75% vegetables, 25% meat. And the idea around this, and I think this is interesting too, is, more and more now, it's probably the last 2, 3, 4 years maybe, this idea of plant-based diets have become a lot more popular. And I don't really like the term plant-based diet that much because it's been come to infer vegetarian, which the research that was used to generate these ideas behind plant-based diets are not vegetarian diets. It's just eating more vegetables and plants, so the vegetables, grains, etc. And so I think the term plant-based diet is very misleading. But if you've listened to any of the shows and you're on the email list reading my emails and newsletters, what you'll know is that I'm a huge proponent of vegetables and plants and getting as much as possible. But I don't think that plus animal-based proteins need to be exclusive. I think when they come together, that's when you really get the nutritional magic to best support your health, performance, and body weight. And so sandwiches can actually be a key component of this. Why they're also great is they're very portable. Like sandwiches are very convenient for people to eat. And so there was this, huge nutrition movement over the last couple decades that have like sworn off sandwiches, like we can't eat them. But they're actually a really good thing for you to eat because it makes eating properly very easy. But what you just need to do is you need to adjust the ratio of meat to vegetables. Now, generally in a sandwich, the vegetables are basically condiments, right? 1 or 2 leaves of lettuce, maybe 2 slices of tomato, the essence of a couple onion slices, pickles, and that's it, right? It's not very much. We're talking like if you were to stack it up, you're half an inch of vegetables, maybe. So instead, what I'd like you to do, if we're going to switch the ratio to 75 veg, 25 meat, what you do is you need to get inches worth of vegetables in your sandwich. So many vegetables that you have to crunch it down in order to take a bite. If you're crunching your sandwich down to like compress the vegetables, you're doing it right. So some non-traditional things that I love to put in sandwiches in order to do this. Number 1 is cucumbers. Cucumbers are the most underrated. I'm not talking pickles, right? Because pickles is a different story. Regular, non-pickled, non-salted, fresh cucumbers. Put them in nice long slices, right? So they can go the length of the bread. You can stack cucumbers. It's such a great way to stack additional vegetables in your diet. But you stack those cucumber slices right on top. The pickle, there are pickles called stackers. So what you want to do, they're long slivers of pickles. You want to do that, but just with regular cucumbers. Boom, that bumps up the volume. Red onion is very popular in sandwiches, but too much red onion because of the bite might not be good for people. So maybe you switch and you do slices of a thin Vidalia onion, right? So it's sweeter, so you can have more of it. That's a great option as well. I've talked about a bunch that one of the things I like to grow on our counter are broccoli sprouts. So I'm always going to throw broccoli sprouts on top of it as well. You're going to add lettuce to it. And all of a sudden what you're doing is you're stacking this up. And the vegetable part where it becomes very, very big. And the more vegetables we get in this, the more filling it's going to be. The one other one that's counterintuitive, but is also great to put on your sandwich is shredded red cabbage. Shredded red cabbage, super inexpensive. You get a head of red cabbage, shred it on like a cheese shredder, or actually if you just shred it, cut it in half and then shred it lengthwise like this, it falls apart into shreds. You can keep that in your fridge, and then you take out that, put some of that on it. So we are onions, we're cucumbers, we're lettuce, broccoli sprouts if you have them, shredded cabbage. There's so much on here. Throw it on some Dave's Killer Bread, Ezekiel bread, some sort of, Dave's Killer Bread. The thin sliced Dave's Killer Bread is my favorite. If they could sponsor the show, I would love that because it's my favorite bread. But, get a bread that's giving you 3 grams of fiber per slice. And then you add on to that, all of a sudden, it's 4 ounces of meat, of cooked, chicken or beef or, a low sodium deli meat, something like that, thinly sliced. You have an incredible sandwich. Like, one, you don't need the cheese, which is fine. I'd rather, I feel like cheese in a sandwich, you don't really get to enjoy it as much as you would if you ate cheese alone. So, I'm a huge fan of cheese, but I think we could save it for another time. Add a little bit of mustard, spicy mustard or something like that, or one of those Bolthouse Farm salad dressings. Use that on the bread. Homemade hummus. We'll do a homemade hummus. I like homemade hummus more than regular, but you can get a little bit of hummus, spread that instead of a mayonnaise or something like that on your sandwich. All of a sudden you have an incredible nutritional meal that's portable, that has more vegetables than most Americans are going to get in their entire day, right? And you're going to enjoy it. And all we had to do, and you'll be a lot fuller after you eat it, all we had to do was tweak the ratios. We went from a 9-to-1 meat to vegetable ratio to a 25% meat, 75% vegetable. We adjust those ratios, same meal, same sandwich, right? We're still eating sandwiches, but the ratio is different. It's much better for us. Way more fiber, way more filling, still just as portable and convenient. So adjust the ratios on your sandwiches and you'll be much happier about it. Next up on the list of ratios we want to adjust, and this is like the forbidden food ratio. So sandwiches are one of those other things that maybe tons of people in nutrition have told you can't have, you got to swear it off, right? Next thing you've been told to swear off is pasta. So instead of swearing off pasta, what we need to do is just adjust the ratio. Now you could go whole wheat pasta, right? That's fine. I think that's great. If you get whole wheat pasta and you want to do that, good. Chickpea pasta is actually one of the new kinds of pasta that's out that if you cook it correctly, it tastes really good. So chickpea pasta would be my preference. To be honest, whole wheat pasta versus regular pasta, you're not actually gaining that much more fiber and nutrients. Like the nutritional differences, like the ratio between fiber and carbs in a whole grain pasta versus our traditional pasta isn't that much. So I wouldn't sweat it, especially with these ratio changes that we're about to talk about making. But if you do go with that chickpea pasta route, I think that's a great one because it tastes good. Just don't overcook it because you got to do a little al dente. Otherwise, it falls apart and it's not any good. But pasta and sauce kind of has the same fate or history as a sandwich. It's, but instead of the meat, it's the carbs, it's the grain, it's the pasta. You're 90% that and you're 10% sauce, right? Even if you go heavy on the sauce, you're 80% pasta, 20% sauce. So what you want to do is you rebalance this ratio somewhere to 1-to-1, and then you go plus or minus. So maybe depending on your carbohydrate and your calorie needs, it's 2 parts pasta, 1 part sauce, or it's 1 part pasta, 2 part sauce. Now, one of the things that I tell you for, the decade plus that I've been doing nutritional counseling with people, pasta and carbs, when you say, they say, I want to lose weight. Great. What have you tried? What's worked in the past? We've talked about this before, the look back method, right? What's worked for you in the past? And they say, cutting out all my carbs so I don't eat pasta, right? Like pasta is the thing. Pasta and bread are the things that people are swearing off. And as you can see here with our discussion about, we don't need to get rid of stuff as much as we need to tweak the ratios. We can keep the bread in the sandwich from the last one. And I'm going to show you how you can keep the pasta. So you might be thinking, okay, I'm going to do 1-to-1 ratio pasta to sauce. But in a traditional sauce, that doesn't really work out very well, right? Because it's just going to be a lot more liquid and you're going to end up eating tomato soup, right? You don't want to eat tomato soup. You want to have pasta. So I would consider this more sauce, finger quote sauce, because we're going to backfill it with so many vegetables that it is almost comes up like a rich cacciatore consistency, if you're familiar with that dish, less of a traditional just marinara or red sauce. So I like to do a couple things here. I'm a huge fan of hiding vegetables. So here's the quick and easy way. And you can do this homemade sauce, which you guys also know, like I love to cook. And so cooking brings like stress reduction and peace in my life. Like I love spending time in the kitchen cooking. So if I'm going to spend, that extra time on the weekend to make pasta sauce, that's not going to be a strain. That's going to be an enjoyment for me. But if that's not you, right, and you don't want to do the homemade sauce, that's fine. Get a jar of sauce. You get a jar of sauce, and now you're going to upgrade it. And you can upgrade this a couple different ways. I'll give you a couple options, and you can kind of pick and choose what works best for you. First thing is you do butternut squash, or you do zucchini, or summer squash, right? One of those three things. Pop them in the oven, slice them, open them up, slice them so they cook a little faster. Pop them in the oven, 375, 30 minutes. That'll be more than enough for the zucchini. The butternut squash depends. It might take a little bit longer until it's, soft and roasted. Take that with the pasta sauce, put it in a blender, blend it all up. Okay, now you're going to have all these vegetables have then just got blended into the pasta sauce, which, let's be honest, right? It's all vegetables too. So the volume is going to increase of this, but without a huge calorie increase. And the nutritional increase is going to be tremendous. So we have that. And now we're going to take other vegetables. So we could take, if we didn't do zucchini in the blend, maybe we're going to do zucchini. We could definitely do diced carrots. We can do onions. We can do peppers. You could do cubed eggplant. Like basically pick any of these vegetables that you enjoy that you can cube or slice, saute them up, and then you're going to add that to the sauce. So now the sauce is thicker in volume because we've hid vegetables in it through that puree process, the roast and then puree. Now we've added sauteed vegetables into it, so the volume is then further increased. Now this is going to be so hearty. What you could do is you could just throw in ground beef, cooked ground beef, mix it in, and you could literally just eat that, no pasta, and it would be a great meal. I love doing that. You could add in diced chicken, sliced chicken. You could add in meatballs. Definitely go homemade meatballs because the store-bought meatballs are going to be high sodium. They're going to use a higher fat quantity ground beef. It's just not going to be as good. So if you do meatballs, I definitely recommend you do homemade meatballs. But you add that to this new enhanced sauce, and then all of a sudden adding, 1 part pasta, so it's 1-to-1, or maybe you add 2 parts pasta. Like the dish is so humongous. We haven't taken away the pasta, but we've kind of displaced on the plate, which is another concept, that's core to the 6 pillars of nutrition, is using dietary displacement. We've added all these vegetables to displace some of the carbs, some of those starches from pastas. So we're still eating a lot more food, and we're still adding the pasta. There's just not as much room in the bowl or on the plate for it. And this is going to allow you to eat and enjoy pasta. And it's going to be a much heartier meal, more fiber, more nutrients, more filling, less calories. And you don't have that playbook or that talk track running through your mind saying, oh, I can't eat pasta. It's bad. I want to lose weight. I'm not going to eat pasta, because you're literally eating pasta. And when you add it to the dish, you're going to be the one who says, oh, I'm going to take a little bit less out because my plate is already so full. So the next ratio that is so important here we're talking about is that pasta ratio. Start at 1-to-1 and you go 2-to-1 or 1-to-2, depending on what your calorie and carbohydrate needs are. But using this strategy to hack the sauce to make it more filling and nutrient rich allows you to enjoy that pasta, but also still make great progress towards your goals. All right, next up, the next ratio we want to talk about is rice and beans. Now, rice and beans is a classic dish that's consumed all over the world. Now, many people might not consume rice and beans if they're trying to lose weight or if they feel like they need to improve their health, because somehow cutting carbs, not somehow, I understand how, cutting carbs has become synonymous with becoming more healthy, right? And so they might not eat this food. People definitely swear off rice. But if you like rice and you want to include it, this is a great way to do it, is you just start adding beans. The traditional ratio of rice to beans is probably 5-to-1, right? Maybe 4-to-1, but depending on how you make it. But what I recommend that you do is you bring this back down to 1-to-1. So 1 part rice, 1 part beans. This becomes super easy because if you cook rice in a rice cooker, you take a scoop of cooked rice, you take a scoop of beans, and you mix them together, right? And all of a sudden you'll look at that and you'll be like, wow, that's so much. If you were to do this cold, and it's a little bit of tangent, but what I would do is I would dice up tomatoes, I would dice up cucumbers, and I would mix it in, and it's going to blow up the volume of that food even more. But if you move this to a 1-to-1 ratio of rice to beans, what it's going to do is it's going to curb the total carbohydrate content in that dish. But what it's also going to do is it's going to significantly bump up the fiber, especially if you're, in a place where you don't really enjoy brown rice yet. And so, white rice, it's faster, it's easier, you like it more. That's fine. Because if you mix it with the beans, all of a sudden you're getting a lot of that fiber that you're missing from the white rice. You're adding that fiber in, you're adding a little bit more protein, you're adding more volume. So it becomes a much more satiating side dish. And we talked about you can dress this up in a variety of ways, add more vegetables, throw on your favorite protein, and you're off to the races. But if we move that rice and beans ratio to 1-to-1, all of a sudden it's a totally different dish, same foods, different ratios. So the next ratio that I think is important that you can play around with is rice and beans, moving it from 5-to-1 or 4-to-1 down to 1-to-1. Now, the last two ratios that I want to talk about, one is kind of an overall meal strategy idea, and the other one is exercise related. So the next one that from a meal strategy standpoint to talk about is the ratio between breakfast and dinner. And what I'm talking about is the size and the overall caloric quantity of those meals. Now, I've saved this one for the end because I definitely consider this nutritional fine-tuning. Because at the end of the day, you know that I'm all about what are the foundational changes that are going to have the biggest effect. We want to make those changes first. We want to really reap the benefits of those changes. But if you're doing that really well, there are fine-tuning steps kind of moving up this pyramid that you can take to further enhance your results. And a lot of people will say, hey, I want to do everything possible. Like if I'm going 75% of the way with these behaviors and habits, I'd really like to put in that extra effort to take it 90, 95, 100% of the way. So one of the ways that you can do this is you can adjust the ratio of the calories that you're eating at breakfast to dinner. Traditionally, people are going to be eating low-calorie breakfasts, higher-calorie dinners, right? Breakfast is just a smaller meal. Dinner is traditionally the big meal. It's more of a social meal. It's more of a sit and enjoy it, definitely larger calorie. But if we look at some of the nuances to human physiology, circadian rhythms, impact on sleep, post-meal metabolic effects, such as the second meal effect, really what the conclusion that you can come to is eating a larger meal earlier in the day is going to be better than eating a larger meal later in the day. So if we shift our calories, more calories to the morning, so we want to eat like a king in the morning, not as much eat like a king at night. And we eat a smaller meal at night. We'll still hit our protein targets, but I would say it's a little bit lower in carbohydrates. And so that means it's going to be a little bit higher in fat at night, whereas breakfast is going to be one of your larger, higher carbohydrate meals. The reason why we can do this is there's some evidence to suggest that meals, eating less later in the day can help improve certain signals related to sleep to help you get better sleep quality. Larger carbohydrate meal earlier in the day. There's some other evidence to suggest that from a circadian rhythm basis, so the rhythm of the rising and the setting of the sun, that insulin sensitivity, your ability to process and use carbohydrates is better earlier in the day. You're going to be more active generally earlier in the day, so you're going to take in those carbohydrates and calories and you're going to put them to use. And so then there's this other phenomenon called the second meal effect, whereas that having a higher carbohydrate meal, that when you come around to have your next meal after that, several hours later, that you're going to have increased sensitivity to those carbohydrates later on. So with this fine-tuning tweak is if we basically switch the ratio, so if it is usually 1 breakfast to 2 dinner from a calorie standpoint, switch it around. So it's larger calorie at breakfast, slightly smaller calorie at dinner. And, that's definitely I would consider it a nuanced change that can impact several key biological pathways to help with insulin sensitivity, also potentially help with your sleep. So if we adjust the ratio of calories at breakfast to dinner, that's another movement that we can make in the right direction. So the last ratio we want to change has to do with exercise. Now, one of the reasons why I brought this up is I was thinking about different ratios and what people should adjust and what's going to make a big impact and their health and fitness, exercise just popped up because with the mass adoption of high intensity interval training, what that's really come to is a lot of negative rest period work. So what I mean by that is that if you're doing these interval training, right, where it's work, rest, work, rest, work, rest, that the rest periods are less than the work periods. That's what would be this negative rest period work. So if you do 30 seconds on, you're only 15 seconds off. If you do 1 minute on, you're 30 seconds off. And part of this has really been driven not by science or not even by the reason why we do interval training, but the marketing behind if you rest less, that means you're tougher and you're going to get in better shape. But that's not really the case. Short rest periods can be very beneficial. But part of the whole thing behind interval training is you reach a certain heart rate zone, you maintain that for a certain period, and then you let your body recover back down to what would be considered rest. And then you go back up, meet that heart rate zone, and then you rest and come back down. And if you immediately jump into these 45 seconds on, 15 seconds off, and repeat that 8 times, the 15 seconds isn't long enough for you to move back down into the recovery zone. So you don't end up actually getting the benefits of interval training. And because you're not getting that recovery, your heart rate's going up, it's not coming all the way back down. And then you're repeating that again and again and again. What you end up doing is your effort towards the end of your interval session becomes significantly worse because you've never actually truly recovered down to your resting zone in between those intervals. So not only are you not getting the true benefit of the interval training, but your effort becomes worse over time. So your net benefit of total calories, because one of the big things with exercise has a lot to do with how can you train the best and the hardest and give your best effort. So your net effort on that session is not as good as it should be. But here's the kicker. At the end, you feel totally gassed. Like you feel totally wiped. You're like, wow, I totally crushed that. But you've handicapped yourself along the way because of these negative rest periods. So instead, I really encourage you to embrace things like a work to rest ratio of 1:2. So 1 minute on, 2 minutes off, or 1:1, 1 minute on, 1 minute off, 30 seconds on, 60 seconds off. That start playing in those zones. Or if you can, one of the things I was talking about this when we talked about in the Q&A episode that we did recently, what are the apps that I use? One of the apps I use is a heart rate zone app on my phone so I can track heart rate, because then you can truly know, am I back down into that rest zone? Now it's time to reinitiate that interval. But don't be so sucked into this hardcore, and that's definitely quotes hardcore, world of hard effort, minimal rest, hard effort, minimal rest. Because the rest part is actually really important to your physiology, and it's really important to your performance over time. Because as you get in better shape, that rest period can then become shorter, and you're able to repeat that effort faster, the high effort. You're able to repeat it faster and more frequently. But if you're not giving yourself the chance to rest, you can never actually improve as much as you should. But these negative rest period workouts are really hard because you end up kind of flatlining your heart rate the entire time. So you're exhausted at the end without really having all those benefits. So one of the things, and because there are so many different prescriptions and nuances that you can do from an interval training perspective, I don't have a set prescription for you here to adjust the ratio. But if you're doing a lot of negative ratio or negative rest period interval work, I definitely recommend you back it up to a 1:1 or even a 2:1, and especially play around with longer periods of exertion. Instead of 45 seconds, play up in that 2 minutes, and then get a heart rate monitor and see how long it takes your heart to get back down to 125, 130 beats per minute before you go back up again, and really start to get in tune with your physiology. And if you can do that, it's simple steps to do that. But if you can, the output that you're going to get, the benefit on the fitness and the health and the body composition side are going to be so much better than just saying, I'm just going hardcore all the time, 30 seconds on, 15 seconds off, and do that day in and day out. So that's going to wrap it up for our look on ratios. Adjusting the ratios in our health and with our nutrition and our actions are so important. And we've talked about 6 things that are very simple. You can start implementing all 7 things. We can start implementing all 7 of these things like literally today with your next upcoming meals if you wanted to, and with your upcoming workouts. Or you can pick 1 or 2. Maybe you don't eat pasta, but maybe you've been dying for a sandwich because you've swore them off because you're trying to lose weight. Now you have a strategy for incorporating sandwiches in your day-to-day life. Maybe you've been force feeding yourself all these eggs because you got to get a ton of protein at breakfast. And now you can do this differently by adjusting the ratios. So play around with those ratios and put them to action. And I'd love to hear how things are going with you. So if you haven't already, guys, definitely go to substancenutrition.com. You can check out the new protein powder that I formulated called Synthesis. Synthesis has recently been third-party certified Informed Sport, which means that it's certified to be free of over 250 banned substances. We test every lot of Synthesis, making sure that the heavy metals, the microbiology, and also the banned substances are totally out and free in this product. It's the highest quality protein you're going to find. It's a mixture of whey protein isolate, micellar casein, very simple ingredient list. It was co-created with me by a master chef named Ken Arnone, so the flavor is on point. If you haven't tried it, head over to substancenutrition.com, check it out. The feedback we've gotten since we launched in July has been tremendous, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you think. I'll see you guys next show.